everyone, let's talk about hidden cause number 6, why you still have low thyroid symptoms, even though you're taking thyroid medication and even though your lab numbers are normal. And it's an elevation in thyroid binding globulin, or TBG. So let me explain what that is. When thyroid hormones are secreted from your thyroid gland, they have to be bound to a little carrier, a little protein. Think of it like a taxi cab. This taxi cab, the thyroid hormone, the T4 and the T3, they jump inside the cab and they get transported to the liver where they're converted. And then they jump back in the cab and they're transported to the rest of the body. So it has to have this little carrier to go anywhere. Now, an elevation in thyroid binding globulin means there's a whole bunch of taxi cabs. In fact, there's so many that the normal free amount of T4 and T3 that should be floating around aren't. It's as if they all get sucked up like a big sponge by all these thyroid binding globulins. And what that means is your TSH will look normal, your total T4 will look normal, your total T3 will look normal. And if that's all your doctor's checking, then this little problem is never going to get identified. You'll be given thyroid hormones, and you probably won't get better. Now, you might have a little bit of a hormone honeymoon where you feel better for a couple of weeks, but eventually you'll go right back to having depression, weight gain, hair loss, feeling cold, no motivation, brain fog. You're going to have all those things again. These binding globulins are elevated by, particularly they're elevated by estrogens. Now, estrogens come in a lot of different forms, right? Estrogens can be hidden in face creams. Estrogens can be in birth control pills. Estrogens can be elevated in a woman who's not detoxifying her estrogens very well. So you see, already we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole a little bit. And what I want you to understand is, if your doctor is not considering binding globulins as a problem, then you're missing part of the reason why you could still be having low thyroid symptoms. So even though TSH is normal and T4 looks normal and total T3 looks normal, if your doctor will check your T3 uptake, or T3U, you will see that that is actually low, because there's like an inverse relationship between T3 uptake and binding globulins. Now, remember, there's also a reference range for that. So if the reference range your doctor's using is the lab range, and you're within the lab range, this could get missed again. Because remember, there's 24 different ways that your thyroid can go wrong, and elevated binding globulin is one of them. And estrogens hanging out in the body elevate binding globulins, which suck up all the free T4 and T3, and therefore nothing gets to the little receptors and you have low thyroid symptoms. But your labs look normal, and you're still taking medication. So remember, estrogens get elevated by things like birth control pills. Sometimes you use face creams and cosmetics that have undisclosed estrogens on them. And they also become elevated, estrogens become elevated in a woman who cannot detoxify them. So let's talk about that briefly. Hormones are detoxified through the liver. So if you have poor liver function, poor detoxification function, this is one of the reasons why you could still have a thyroid problem. And it's not a gland problem. It's a liver problem, really. Now, what would cause someone to have poor detoxification in their liver? Well, the very biggest thing is blood sugar. Glucuronidation is the process, one of the processes by which you detoxify hormones. The gluco means glucose. If you don't have normal, steady glucose to supply your liver, then you can't detoxify appropriately. And see what happens? You can't just look at these things from the surface. You've got to dig down deep and understand the physiology in order to really help someone who hasn't been helped yet. So what types of blood sugar problems are we talking about? We're talking about low blood sugar and high blood sugar. Because high blood sugar means there's nothing getting into the cells. Usually that's from insulin resistance, and that can be caused by cortisol. The other variety of a blood sugar problem is low blood sugar, or reactive hypoglycemics. These are the people that get shaky, lightheaded, and irritable between meals. Now, these people don't have any blood in their cells because they just don't eat anything, or something is shutting down their cortisol. I don't want to get too far off into that, but the point is, a binding globulin problem is one way that you could have low thyroid symptoms but have normal lab numbers, even though you're taking medication. So I hope that you're seeing someone that understands that you got to look at binding globulins. And if you find binding globulins that are elevated, why are they elevated? So that's when the detective work kicks in. You got to put on your thinking cap and start doing the appropriate testing and finding out, is it a liver problem? Is it birth control pills? What actually is happening here. And it's only when you start to turn over every one of these rocks, okay, It's only when you start to really dig deep and do a comprehensive workup on someone from a functional perspective that you can help someone that's been suffering forever with low thyroid symptoms, because what they have is actually a binding globulin problem. And thyroid hormones aren't going to help that.